Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another edition of Crimes of the Week International. A UK man attempting to pull off a never-before-completed running challenge announced that he is facing quite the setback this week after he and his team were robbed at gunpoint, losing important valuables and documents. According to reports, 26-year-old Russell Cook, who also goes by the nickname Hardest Geezer online, is currently attempting to run the length of the continent of Africa. His goal is to run from the southernmost point of South Africa to the northernmost point of Tunisia, a distance of roughly 9,300 miles or about 14,500 kilometers. The journey was supposed to take Cook 8 months, during which time he would run the equivalent of 360 marathons in 240 days. However, it's now unclear if the 26-year-old will be able to complete his goal due to an unfortunate and terrifying incident. Though things started off well when Cook kicked off the challenge in April, that changed on day 64 when he and his team were ambushed by 2 men with guns in the country of Angola. According to Cook, the men demanded everything they had, taking several $1,000s worth of camera equipment, cash, and other valuables. While this was certainly upsetting on its own, the bigger problem was that the robbers also took everyone's passports, which included the visas they needed to enter some of the upcoming countries to continue the journey. Without these, Cook says they are essentially stuck, and because of poor logistics in some of these nations, new visas have been difficult to obtain. For almost 2 weeks, they reportedly tried to scramble and get new paperwork, even backtracking at one point to Namibia, in the hopes that this would accelerate the process. However, on day 77, the team was forced to announce that they were pausing the challenge. At the time of this recording, it's unclear whether the journey will resume, although Cook seems to be trying to stay positive. In an interview with the BBC, the 26-year-old said that he and the team had already overcome a lot of other problems so far, and that this was just another obstacle. He also stated that despite what happened, he is determined not to let people get the wrong idea about the countries he's visited, saying, quote, "Almost everyone we've met in Angola has been really friendly and welcoming, so it's a shame this happened, but c'est la vie." He went on to say that local police were assisting them and were doing what they could to make sure something like this didn't happen again. A South Australian family has reportedly been left shaken this week after they say that their unhinged neighbor showed up at their property unannounced and began smashing up the front of their home with a baseball bat. The whole thing allegedly began just before 7:20 p.m. on July 9th at a home in the Adelaide suburb of Morphettvale, where single mother Jessie Griffiths lives with her 2 boys. The 3 were apparently enjoying a quiet evening when out of nowhere they heard a terrifying commotion at the front door. That commotion was allegedly the sound of their 52-year-old neighbor who had walked onto their property armed with a baseball bat. Without a word, she had started swinging at the glass of their front door and windows. Jessie says that one of her 2 boys was just inches away from the home's entrance when the attack began. She says that they were both terrified and witnessed as glass began flying everywhere. After wailing on the door numerous times, the 52-year-old attacker reportedly finished up by smashing the windshield and windows of Jessie's car with a hammer before finally walking off. The suspect was later arrested on property damage charges, though has since been released on bail. As for the alleged motive behind the crime, Jessie claims that it was likely prompted by another recent problem they had with the same neighbor. In that instance, she says that she called the police because the 52-year-old had tried to steal their dog, Spot. She told the media in an interview that she is now considering applying for a restraining order against the neighbor, as well as increasing security around her home. Authorities in the Taiwanese city of Taitung say that a woman is lucky to be alive this week after she was the victim of a terrifying knife attack in broad daylight, one that was only stopped thanks to the courage of a group of Good Samaritans. According to reports, the incident began at around 12:15 p.m. on July 9th when the victim, a 26-year-old woman identified only by the last name Jiang, went to a convenience store on Zhongxing Road. After making her purchases, she headed back outside, presumably planning to go on with her day. However, unbeknownst to her, she was now being followed. As Jiang walked across the street, surveillance cameras captured as a man, later identified as a 50-year-old by the last name of Chang, hurried along behind her. This continued until Chang caught up, at which point he jumped on the 26-year-old, taking her to the ground and slashing at her with a utility knife. While Jiang managed to momentarily break free from the attack and call for help, Chang was allegedly persistent and continued to try and stab and slash at her. Thankfully, though, it was at this point that several bystanders decided to intervene. According to reports, at least 4 men proceeded to surround Chang, luring him away from the 26-year-old victim. Several of them armed themselves with improvised weapons, including an electric fan, a suitcase belonging to the victim, and a large metal soup ladle. Eventually, the man with the soup ladle managed to knock the knife out of Chang's hand, after which the others took him to the ground. He was held until police arrived and placed him under arrest. Though Jiang had to be hospitalized for multiple injuries to her neck, arms, and thighs, authorities say that luckily none of her wounds are life-threatening. Apparently, she did not know Chang prior to the incident, and the attack is believed to have been random. Authorities in the Brazilian city of São Paulo say that they are investigating a horrifying murder case this week after a young woman was allegedly killed in an arson attack at the hands of her abusive ex-boyfriend. Police were called to the home of 22-year-old Debra Almeida Monteiro on the night of July 11th after a serious fire broke out at the property. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, but sadly, the 22-year-old's charred remains were discovered once the blaze was put out. It didn't take long for investigators to come up with a suspect in the case. Debra had a protective order against her former boyfriend, Alan Neves, who had threatened her life multiple times. According to reports, Neves made no attempt to hide his violent intentions towards his ex-girlfriend. In audio messages he sent to his family, he apparently openly talked about how if he ran into Debra in public, he would attack her. Witnesses claim that on the day after the murder, Neves came over to Debra's house where she had lived alone for less than a month and was acting aggressively. The 22-year-old apparently managed to get him to leave, but that night he allegedly returned wearing a mask and carrying a container of gasoline. A neighbor, who was one of the first to realize what happened, said he first heard what sounded like an explosion coming from Debra's residence. He ran to her door and tried to make his way inside to see if she was all right, but the smoke and the flames were overwhelming. He and others desperately tried to throw water into the home while they waited for help to arrive, but sadly, they were unable to save Debra. At the time of this recording, police say that they are still searching for Neves, who appears to be on the run. When they visited his address following the incident, he was nowhere to be found. The situation is still developing. Authorities in the Thai province of Songkhla say that a fugitive is finally in custody this week following a deadly shooting nearly 2 decades ago. According to reports, the incident began all the way back in April of 2005 during the celebration of Songkhla, the Thai New Year's holiday. It was during this time that the then 20-year-old suspect, identified only by the name Chaitawat, and 2 of his friends got into a fight with a group of teenagers. The fight apparently started out as a verbal altercation, but quickly escalated to the point of violence, ending when Chaitawat and his friends pulled out guns and started shooting, killing multiple people. While Chaitawat's 2 accomplices were caught shortly afterwards, he managed to flee before being caught. For more than 18 years, police were unable to track down the killer fugitive. That was, until recently when they got a tip that he was hiding out in Shanghai province. The lead turned out to be accurate, and Chaitawat was arrested by a joint task force comprised of local police, marine police, and members of the anti-crime squad. After being taken into custody, the now 38-year-old Chaitawat allegedly confessed to being involved in the shooting and shared details of the crime with investigators. He also said that he had survived for this long on the run by moving from place to place and working jobs in construction. The 38-year-old's arrest apparently came at an opportune time for investigators. According to reports, in less than 2 years, the statute of limitations would have expired in the case, at which point Chaitawat could have no longer been prosecuted for his crimes. A 35-year-old UK man is blasting his local police force this week after he says he was forced to conduct his own investigation into an attempted theft at his property when officers refused to even come and take a look. The whole thing reportedly started on July 6th in the town of Fenton, when 35-year-old Will Grieve returned home from work to find that the gate to his back garden had been broken. After noticing that the tarp covering his Suzuki motorcycle was out of place, he took a closer look, realizing that one of the bike's headlights was also damaged. Luckily, Will had a surveillance camera set up in the yard, which revealed what had happened. At around 5:30 a.m. that morning, a man had hopped his fence and kicked down his gate before trying to steal the motorcycle. The only reason the suspect had been unsuccessful was that Will had chained the bike to the ground. Believing that the case was straightforward, Will contacted the Staffordshire police to report what had happened. However, to his surprise, he says, he was told that police would not come by to visit the scene and assess the damage. Instead, they simply assigned him a reference number, asked him for the evidence he had collected, and said they would be in touch. After the disappointing news, Will reportedly conducted his own investigation, finding out the name and address of the alleged perpetrator. He says he provided this info to police, but still nothing has happened. Feeling a sense of helplessness, the 35-year-old took to social media, posting some of the evidence he had collected. He also made up a sign featuring an image of the suspect, which he posted on his gate. On it, he wrote a message that reads, quote, "Thief, I know who you are, so keep your eyes open. You are all over social media and police are informed. I will find you." Will says he hopes that the sign will act as a deterrent, as he fears there's nothing stopping the man from simply coming back with more tools and taking another shot at stealing his bike. In a statement to media, he expressed his frustration with the whole ordeal, saying in part, quote, "I only got my motorbike license last year, and despite having 10 years of no claims, my first year of bike insurance was £2,000. You work hard to pay for these things, and even with the high level of security, someone still tried to take it and damaged it. I'd like to know he's been sent down for some time to learn his lesson and make him see sense. It is what it is for now, and until I receive further information, there's nothing I can do. It's just a case of waiting." For their part, Staffordshire police claim that they are investigating and are now appealing for witnesses in connection with the attempted theft. However, it remains unclear why the evidence Will provided hasn't been sufficient for an arrest. Authorities in the Indian city of Bengaluru say that 2 executives at an internet services company were brutally murdered in broad daylight this week after a former employee and 2 accomplices allegedly came to their offices and attacked them. According to reports, the incident took place sometime in the late afternoon of July 11th at the Aeronix Internet Company in Bengaluru's Amrutahali area. It began when the suspects, a 27-year-old man identified only by the nickname Felix, and his 2 alleged accomplices, Vinay and Santosh, showed up at the business looking for 2 of its owners, CEO Vinu Kumar and Managing Director Panindra Subramanya. The 3 suspects were told that the executives were not there, but apparently decided to wait until they returned. When they did, they were ushered into Panindra's office for a meeting. Witnesses say that the closed-door meeting went on for about 15 to 20 minutes until employees started to hear screams coming from inside. Moments later, Panindra and Vinu burst out and tried to escape, but both men collapsed to the ground with visible stabbing injuries. The suspects, who were allegedly armed with multiple weapons, including a sword and some machetes, then fled the scene. Sadly, both victims were later pronounced dead at a local hospital. The following day, authorities announced that they had tracked down all 3 of the alleged killers, who now remain in custody. The exact details of what motivated the terrifying crime remain fuzzy at this time, with sources we came across reporting conflicting information about the case. Most state that Felix, the main suspect, was a former employee of the 2 victims, while others have reported that Vanu and Panindra recently left a company that Felix was working at in order to start their own business. In either case, though, it seems that at the very least, the murders were motivated by some sort of business dispute. At the time of this recording, the situation is still under investigation. A heartbroken Chinese woman's troubles reportedly went from bad to worse recently when she tried to enact revenge on her cheating boyfriend, only to end up the subject of a widely panned viral video. According to reports, the whole thing started recently when the unidentified woman from Shanghai discovered that her boyfriend of 6 years had been unfaithful to her. Understandably, this came as a serious emotional blow, as it likely would for anyone in this situation. However, while we can all identify with the woman's pain, the same can't necessarily be said for what happened next. Sometime after discovering the cheating, though it's unclear exactly when, the woman got into a taxi when she allegedly came up with a way to get revenge. She asked the driver if he wanted to have sex in his car. Unfortunately for the woman, the taxi driver wasn't interested. He was a married man, and unlike her boyfriend, apparently took infidelity seriously. Evidently, though, this rejection was too much for the heartbroken woman to bear. She proceeded to have a very aggressive and very public meltdown, during which time she attacked the driver and vandalized his car before sitting down in the middle of the road and starting to wail. She was arrested a short time later. As if this weren't punishment enough, even more unfortunately for the woman, some of the incident was captured on video by confused bystanders, who promptly uploaded the footage to social media where it went viral. As you might imagine, not too many people took the woman's side in the whole debacle. At the time of this recording, police say that they are still investigating and have yet to announce any kind of decision on formal charges. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.